Good afternoon once again. My name is Alex Simpson. I am from the California Department of Justice. Very happy to be joining all of you for the third subcommittee meeting of this year of the Accountability in Civilian Complaints Subcommittee of the Racial and Identity Profiling Advisory Board. We do have quorum. We have established quorum, and I'm going to turn it over to Subcommittee Co-Chair Pastor Kreiner. Thanks so much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, sir, for your introduction. I appreciate all that have agreed to come on today. So I will call this meeting to order officially at 1:04 on September the 2nd. Thank you to all who are joining us, both those who are board members as well as those who are joining us as community. We appreciate you. We'll go ahead and get started with our welcome and our introductions. I'm going to ask each board member, if you can, if you would please, let's do the round robin for today, just to save time and effort. If you would introduce yourself, and then if you would piggyback to someone else that is a part of the board so they can introduce themselves as well. And then we'll go ahead and get started after that. And again, please forgive me for my camera being off. I had to tell our staff that I am leaving one meeting, heading back to my office. And as soon as I get to my office, I promise I will put my video on so you all can see my face and smile, okay? So I will pass it over to my brother, William, and I'll let him get started. Board Member William.
Thank you, Board Member Kreiner. It's good to see everybody. Those I can see. My name is William Armeline. Bill or Will is fine. I'm a professor at San Jose State University. Been there for a long time. And I'm just actually getting reappointed through Senate, on Senate side. Happy to do that. And I will quickly pass it on to Angela.
Great, thank you so much. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Angela Sierra. I'm an attorney with the California Department of Justice in the Civil Rights Enforcement Section, and I'm the Attorney General Rabonta's designee on the board, and also with Andrea Guerrero and one of the co-chairs of the board this year. So looking forward to this meeting, and I will pass it over to Andrea.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Andrea Guerrero. I'm the Executive Director at Alliance San Diego, and happy to be here. And I will pass it to Chauncey Smith.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Chauncey Smith. I'll be on camera in just a few minutes. Apologies for that. I'm with Catalyst California, and I'm an appointee of the Attorney General, Rob Bonta. I will popcorn or pass it to, looks like that might be everybody. Am I missing anyone? Or back to the chairs or the committee chairs or the DOJ staff?
Thank you, sir. We appreciate you, Chauncey. Are there any other board members that were not able to introduce themselves? If so, would you introduce yourselves now? If not, thank you so much for our DOJ staff for joining us, as well as all of our board members that are taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us on this afternoon. Next on our agenda is our approval of the May 27th meeting. I have all board members have the opportunity to look over the meeting minutes from last meeting. If so, I'll give you just a brief time just to do your last review of it. And once that is done, what has been done, I'll open it up for any of our board members to give us our approval of our minutes so that we can adopt the minutes into permanent records. And when that time, any of our board members can make a motion, and then we'll second that motion.
I'll move to accept the minutes.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second on the floor?
I will second that. This is Angela Sierra.
Ms. Angela, DOJ staff, look at a roll call just to make sure that we have everything on permanent record, please.
Thank you, Co-Chair Kreiner. Motion on the floor to approve the May 27, 2025 meeting minutes of the Accountability and Civilian Complaints Subcommittee. Armeline?
Yes.
Armeline, aye. Pastor Kreiner?
Aye.
Reiner, aye. Guerrero,
Aye.
Guerrero, aye. Sierra,
Aye.
Sierra, aye. Smith,
Aye.
Smith, aye. The motion passes unanimously.
Ms. Simpson, we appreciate you, sir. At this point, we will now introduce our DOJ staff to give us our updates of our Department of Justice, please. That is our next item on the agenda. I will turn it over to our DOJ staff.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rebecca Fretz. I'm a Deputy Attorney General at the California Department of Justice. My colleague, Martha Gomez, and I will be providing the DOJ update on the current draft of the Civilian Complaints and Accountability sections of this year's RIPA report. During the last subcommittee meeting, we provided a more detailed overview of some of the major topics covered in these two sections of the report. So during today's update, we'd just like to cover a few new updates in the draft report and highlight a few areas for potential discussion by today's subcommittee during today's subcommittee meeting. So first, I think we have a PowerPoint. I'm going to pause a little bit and see if we can get that up. Not sure who's running that.
I can share my
Martha,
screen.
can you get that? Thank you. Okay. Great, thank you. Let's go ahead and flip to the next slide. Okay, we're going to start with the civilian complaints section today. First, in the civilian complaints section of the report, the analysis of the complaint data that the California DOJ has received from the RIPA reporting agencies has been added into the draft report. As similar as to last year's report, this section provides an overview of the civilian complaint data received by the RIPA reporting agencies, and it discusses the number of complaints alleging racial or identity profiling, the dispositions of civilian complaints reported by RIPA reporting agencies, and a cross-year comparison that includes a breakdown of the RIPA complaint data by wave 1 through 4 agencies. Second, the civilian complaint section includes an update on the status of deterrent language in complaint forms. In previous reports, the board had expressed concerns that Penal Code Section 148.6 could have a chilling effect on members of the public seeking to file a complaint. Specifically, the board was concerned that requiring a complainant to sign a written statement acknowledging that an individual may face criminal liability for filing a false complaint could discourage community members from submitting valid complaints. As to date, the constitutionality of this penal code section and deterrent language in law enforcement agencies' complaint forms is currently still pending before the California Supreme Court in the case of Los Angeles Police Protective League versus City of Los Angeles. The court is considering, I'm just going to recap, just as a reminder, the court is considering 3 issues: whether this Penal Code Section 148.6, particularly subdivision A2, constitutes improper viewpoint discrimination in violation of the First Amendment, whether this Penal Code section imposes an impermissible burden on the ability to file or on the city to accept police misconduct complaints, and whether it is error to compel the city to comply with a statute that has been ruled unconstitutional by the United States Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit. So the board has been monitoring this case for any new developments to include in this year's report. The California Supreme Court held oral arguments on this case, I believe, back in May, and then they requested supplemental briefing, which has now been submitted as of mid-August, but the court has yet to issue a final opinion in this case. So since this matter is still pending, the current draft of the report contains a short recap of this issue and then an update stating that this issue of deterrent language in complaint forms is still an active issue that the board will continue to monitor. Finally, in the civilian complaint section, as of now, the draft does not include any recommendations or any previews for what the board would like to cover in next year's report. So this is an issue for potential discussion again today by the subcommittee. The civilian complaints section this year is pretty straightforward, doesn't contain any special focus. So subcommittee may decide just to, we have some potential recommendations to include in the accountability section. So the board can discuss today, board members can discuss whether they'd like to include any recommendations or preview anything for next year's report that they would like to include in the civilian complaints section next year. Next slide, please. So now we'll turn to the accountability section. Just to preview, the two main topics in the accountability section in this year's report is civilian oversight. We have completed the draft of the civilian oversight section, and then the draft also, the second main topic is updated Senate Bill number 2, certification action data received by posts. For civilian oversight, we have inserted some charts that provide a preview of the civilian oversight agencies for Wave 1 and Wave 2 RIPA reporting agencies, and have included some potential recommendations, which Martha will discuss after I talk about the SB2 updated data. So next slide, please. So as far as the SB2 police peace officer decertification data update in this current draft of the report, the subcommittee agreed to include the update SB2 peace officer decertification data from posts similar to the data that was included in last year's report. That updated data report by post has now been added into the draft and includes SB2 data from January 1st of 2023 through August 4th of 2025. Of relevance for the board's purposes of eliminating racial and identity profiling, of the 43,958 serious misconduct allegations post has received through August 4th of this year, officers demonstrating bias is the second most common type of serious misconduct alleged, following the category of physical abuse and excessive force. The subcommittee has also previously expressed an interest in including a regional comparison of SB2 data between Northern and Southern California law enforcement agencies. So the current draft also incorporates this regional analysis throughout the SB2 data section. And I'm just going to highlight a few of the major points that are currently in the draft. For certification actions taken by post against officers, which can include decertification or permanent or temporary suspensions, these certification actions were spread fairly proportionally between Northern and Southern California agencies. Post has initiated certification action so far against 554 officers, and there was not a significant difference between the number of officers in Northern versus Southern California law enforcement agencies who post took these actions against. An additional 41 actions were taken against officers employed by statewide agencies, which include the California Highway Patrol and the California DOJ. Second, between Northern and Southern California, the basis of a complaint, charge, or allegation of serious misconduct did not vary significantly between Northern and Southern California agencies. There's a relatively higher proportion of the abuse of power and demonstrating bias basis in Southern California, and there's a relatively higher proportion of the dishonesty basis in Northern California agencies. There's also a table in the draft report that breaks down SB2 actions by agencies with the most SB2 actions taken against officers. Generally, Southern California largest law enforcement agencies are larger than Northern California's. So the 5 law enforcement agencies in Southern California with the most officers subject to SB2 certification actions had between 12 and 62 officers subject to such actions, whereas in Northern California, the number of officers subject to SB2 certification actions is between 9 and 19. Generally, the most common type of serious misconduct involves acts that violate the law for these top agencies. So that's a brief SB2 update. There's a more detailed breakdown in the draft report, but I'm going to turn it over now to the presentation over to Martha to talk about the updates that we've made to the civilian oversight section.
Thank you, Rebecca. So as Rebecca mentioned, we last discussed during our May subcommittee meeting that the RIPA report will include information about civilian oversight bodies and how they correlate with the reduction of racial and identity profiling. In the next slides, we will have the board's proposed recommendations related to the use of RIPA data by the civilian oversight bodies, and hopefully that'll lead to further discussion on those recommendations. So here we have, number 1, the civilian oversight agencies should incorporate the elimination of racial and identity profiling as part of their efforts to increase public safety. Number 2, that they should have unfettered access to their agency's annual RIPA data and citizen complaint data, both in relation to all vehicle and pedestrian stops and citizen complaints alleging racial and identity profiling. Number 3, that the civilian oversight agencies and researchers should consider the use of RIPA data when measuring for and reducing identity group disparities. Number 4, that civilian oversight agencies and researchers should use the data to measure and identify any racial and identity group disparities in policing practices, propose changes to policies and practices aimed at remedying these disparities, and to continue to monitor those disparities over time. 5, that the civilian oversight agencies should use RIPA data to conduct empirical self-audits, such as assessing longitudinal and annual trends, assessing trends within departments by units and individual officers, comparing their LEA levels of racial and identity group disparities against the statewide trends to identify any spikes, seeking community input to interpret trends and address these trends, figure out how to what they mean and how they need to be addressed. Assess how the implementation of policies affects certain identity groups over time. And figure out how COAs can develop additional ways to use the RIPA data in a manner that is consistent with their model and mission, and look for ways to strengthen their existing models. These recommendations fall in line perfectly with the more complete chapter that the board has reviewed. And so with that, we invite you to have any discussion or ask any questions related to whatever, both complaints and accountability, if any.
Okay, thank you so much for that report. Does anyone else from our DOJ staff have anything else to add, or can I move on to the next item?
Yeah.
All right, wonderful. Well, listen, board, I want you all to understand that this is the last opportunity that we have as a subcommittee to discuss the sections in this year's report. So I'm really encouraging us, if possible, if we have any questions, any comments that we can give to our staff to provide better information or better knowledge that is necessary to complete this report so we can move forward would be absolutely incredible. All because this is really the last opportunity that our board has for significant input. Okay. So if there is anything that any of our board members would like to add or any questions that we would like to ask to our staff, now is your opportunity to do so. And we're going to give as much time as necessary in order for our board to raise those questions and for our staff to give us those answers, or for us to provide comment that are necessary for this report. If any of our board members like to ask any questions or give any comments. I see Ms. Andrea's hand. Board member, I'll give it to you, and then Bill, I'll give it to you after that.
Great, thank you. Yeah, the recommendations went by quickly, so I might have missed this. But do we have any recommendations in there about proposed set of criteria for civilian oversight agencies to measure their own effectiveness? I know that in the report we stated that there is no standard measurement to evaluate the effectiveness of the COAs, but there's best practices. And I don't know if that turned into a recommendation, forgive me if it did and I just didn't see it, but a recommendation to evaluate effectiveness based on best practice criteria. It might be something for us to consider.
So in terms of the recommendations, and I don't know if this is a question directed towards me, but I can potentially answer some of it, is the RIPA data itself tends to be very standardized and symmetric, and it's across all the California LEAs. So it can be, what we're proposing is that COAs use that data to assess whether their practices and policies are leading to a reduction in racial disparities within the LEA that they oversee. And so it's not quite a best practices across the board, because each agency would have to look at the issues that they identify and then come up with policies directed towards addressing those disparities. And it may be case by case of different practices or changes that may lead to that improvement in policing.
Okay, yeah, thanks. I think maybe this is more pertinent to the accountability section, so I'll hold. Thank you. Oh, before I go though, I did notice that the data for Oakland for 2020, I can't quite tell. I think it's 22 and 24 is missing. And actually for a few others, Stockton, Alameda.
Yes, board member, I did notice that it was missing as well. Staff, can we address that, please?
So thank you for pointing that out. I think if you're referring to the civilian complaints section, there are some footnotes that explain some of those gaps with regards to the Oakland Police Department. The Oakland Police Department reported that it was unable to report civilian complaint data for 2024 within the reporting time frame due to a cyber attack that happened during that period of time. So that is the reason for that particular gap there. With regards to some of the other complaint data that you see missing there, I'd ask that the board look to, I think it's footnote 7, also talks about some of the reasons why there are gaps there. But we will make sure that if there are any additional gaps that aren't explained in the footnotes, that they will either be addressed or that we will put in explanatory footnotes to address those missing portions of the data.
Cool. You mind if I jump in, Andrea?
Yeah, I'm done.
Cool. In addition to those excellent questions, I was asked to kind of do a once over this week, give it my best academic kind of read. And I just have a couple things. First of all, I just want to say thank you to the DOJ staff for working so hard on this. I especially thought that the background information on COAs was really good. It provides really good context. I also appreciate kind of where you land on the analysis, where there's an emphasis on independence and teeth. It's my experience as well that those are the issues with all of these boards and IPAs, either one, frankly. I mean, I appreciate that they're separated out for clarity. I think it's a really good idea. But I definitely, from my own experience and my own experience looking at the data on these, the independence and the teeth part are really important. And so you landing on that and highlighting that, I think is really important in the kind of the conclusion of that section. And I think the more you can do that, the better. And as you point out, that's also backed by the data. I just think, you do such a great job with the background. I just want to make sure that we're landing on a very clear statement in the conclusion about what the takeaway is. And I think to me, those are the big takeaways. And I appreciate that in your write-up. So I just wanted to give that feedback. I have a quick question, however, just real quick on the SB2 stuff. So first of all, it seems, good actually that we're seeing things level out between Southern and Northern California, because I think the initial data was a little goofy. So I think that tells us that something's going well, that data seems to be leveling out. So that probably was an anomaly of sorts. We'll see as we get more years to test that. but I just am curious. I know I saw one piece in the description of the data where it said that none of the SB2 cases were because of law enforcement gang activity or any kind of affiliation stuff. Am I correct in assuming that then there were no uses of the CLEAR Act this past year for SB2? Is that an assumption that's pretty safe? I'm sorry if my question's not clear to DOJ staff. My question is, am I safe to assume that that means that there were no SB2 actions using the CLEAR Act, which again is a, for those who don't know, is a California act that basically makes it a fireable offense for California law enforcement to be affiliated with like white supremacist organizations and things of this sort?
So I can't answer that affirmatively, but I will look into that, and we'll try to get that addressed in the next version of the draft, so we can give you an answer on that one way or the other.
Garrett, that's awesome, bro. And don't take that as like a big stress for the report. That's more of a question I think I and the committee have, because I'm starting to get a lot of questions since we authored that bill back in the day. I'm getting a lot of questions on use. And I know DOJ did a couple actual seminars this year on CLEAR Act. So I'm just kind of trying to get an idea where that's falling in the data. Not super important for the report, but I think it's an important question for us kind of moving forward. But thank you, Garrett.
That definitely can be something that we can look into putting the sentence in there.
Awesome.
That addresses that. I like, I don't know off the top of my head, so I don't want to say affirmatively.
Oh, all good.
Yeah.
No sweat, man. I'm just trying to give really solid feedback.
Right? Yeah, no, that's good feedback. That's good feedback.
So just a question. It's a more of a intellectual curiosity that I'm asking for other reasons that are not for discussion today. Something to think about for later. But cool. Again, great job on the reanalysis of the SB2, bro. This is really solid information. Lastly, because I don't want to take too much time, I know there'll be other opportunities to discuss some of this stuff. I want to switch over to the accountability side, or sorry, civilian complaint side. So there's one piece of data that I want to bring up, not just for staff, but for committee members, that really stands out for me. So as I'm looking through this stuff for our DOJ staff, I'm trying to do my best in terms of like methodological rigor. Like I'm looking at it like to test for method and all that, which frankly, our DOJ staffers that are working on this are really solid. Garrett and others have been very solid on their methodological practice. So I haven't had to do much there. And that's a real compliment to the staffers. I really appreciate their hard work. I do have so I don't have any methodological comments. It looks very solid to me. I do have one substantive comment. So if we look at page 2, there is an incredible piece of data there that, it kind of depends on how one wants to think about it in terms of what it indicates, right? So if you look at the data, we have a total of over 1,500, so about 1,552 racial identity profiling complaints that reached disposition, that reached a final sort of decision. A vast majority of those are racial and ethnicity kinds of complaints. And of those 1,552 complaints, only three are sustained. So this can mean all kinds of things, but it's got to mean something. You can't have over 1,500 people file a complaint of racism, and only 3 of them are found to be sustained. The rest are either completely written off, or they're evaluated as, basically not true. And so, I mean, that is, so what are we saying? Are we saying that people are liars? Or are we saying that maybe we need to look at how these cases are being adjudicated? Because that is a massive disparity. And so I think that needs to, we can't just drop that data point and not say anything about it. I mean, that's a huge deal. And I mean, I could be a critical community organization reading this and being like, looks like law enforcement is just basically ignoring our complaints. Because I mean, that's a wild amount. I mean, sociologically, we would have statistical methods to test like whether that's even like it's so extreme. Like we would have to put that through additional rigor. So it's something that I think we need to deal with in the report. And I don't have like the answer in my mind because I'm still kind of working through what I see. But one thing we might consider, and I think we might need to do, is give some kind of commentary on like how these decisions are being made. And maybe that's something that we need to look into next, because I mean, I can just say, you know, on just the raw statistics, and Garrett, I'm sure you agree. I mean, that is a wild data point. And I'll end there.
Bill, I have to agree with you, man. Like whether we add commentary to it or whether we add some sort of, I don't know, some footnote or something to explain why there's a vast disparity that exists there, it's necessary because it actually adds more questions than it does answers. And the one thing we don't want to do is leave our community with questions, right? Especially in today's ever divided nation that we're in today. We don't want to add anything to that. Staff, do we have any rhetoric that we want to add back to it or regarding what Bill is stating?
I know Angela has her hand up as well. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to throw us off on some wild tangent. Again, I was asked to look through and see if there's anything really meaningful in the data. As just a really meaningful, I mean, that's a very meaningful finding. So we need to be able to
I
deal
agree with you, my friend.
Right, yeah.
I agree with you 100%.
Perfect. Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to derail the mission here. That's all. Yeah, go ahead, everybody.
No, I don't. I'm gonna. As a chair, I'm definitely gonna make sure that we go where we need to go as moderating this meeting. But I definitely don't want to overlook something because we do have many of our community that's on as well, and I don't want our community to feel like we're just overlooking it or pushing past it. As board, our responsibility is to be responsible, especially in the area that we are subcommittee accountability, right? So I want to make sure that we give time, and I know Ms. Angela has more time under her than she can give us time. And I'm pretty sure her question and comment that she's going to give is important, and it may even add to this. But I definitely want to make sure you're heard. I want to make sure that your concerns are heard. Does our staff have anything they want to respond back to it? Or if not, we will move on, Ms. Angela, but we do want a point of noting that what our board member just stated is a major concern.
Is there any suggestion? I appreciate. Hey, DJ, this is Chauncey. Hey, good to collaborate with you as usual. Bill, thank you for uplifting what you just offered up about, the very small likelihood of having any complaints sustained. I think it goes beyond, reason that it could be such a low number, just in terms of the reality of everyday life. And I think it's an indicator of problems with processes in terms of how complaints are reviewed and decided. I wonder if there are any suggestions on what we could say in the report on this issue. Because we don't have the information we have the statistics, right, at a macro level, but we don't know what happened in each particular matter, so we can't re-review it. We could make I don't know, I'm thinking, this is an imperfect thought, on the fly, but we could just take note of it, that there's such a small number, and kind of unpack it a little bit in a way that's not overly presumptuous, but just indicates that this doesn't seem, it just points to a potential issue. But I'm not sure exactly how we would say that, because it's the first time responding to your idea.
I mean, just to keep this going, and Angela, I know you're holding your hand for a separate issue, but please jump in if you want to jump in on this. Just chime in.
Okay.
Because I'm not trying to run over you, but Chauncey, I think you're right, man. I put this in the chat. The best thing I can come up with, because we do this sometimes in academic work, right, in scholarship, like sometimes we find something that we don't expect to find, and that really becomes the finding itself. And even though you don't expect it, you still got to, meaning we're scientists, right? You still got to go with that, right? So maybe we have to say something like, hey, this is concerning. I mean, maybe we just say what we're saying right here. It's like, in this report, we're noting a concerning piece of data. Here's what it is. Statistically speaking, right, this is questionable, and it's, you know, for a number of reasons that I could explain methodologically. But we don't really have the information right now to delve into the issue. So what it means is, for the following report, maybe we need to be asking questions and have a whole section on how are these decisions actually being adjudicated, because maybe that's the real issue, right? And this is kind of tease us up to now get into this issue for the next time around. Excuse me if this is not good enough, but it's just, that's my best, like, kind of brainstorm, kind of right off top from Chauncey, what you're saying. But yeah, that's all I can coming up with in the moment.
This is Angela. I'll just jump in on this point. This is also what as we're listening to this conversation, Bill, that's what I was thinking as well. You know, noting this, that we're concerned, but I do think it really is going to take some exploring, and this could be part of our vision for next year for this chapter. You know, maybe we're going to want to invite folks that are doing the SB2 reviews, you know, and investigations to come talk to us, not maybe about particular complaints, but the process. And, you know, when they see that kind of statistic, what are they doing, you know, to kind of ensure, like, you know, is there a problem or not a problem? I think there's a lot for us to ask about and to learn. I'd be hesitant of jumping to too many conclusions at this point, other than noting it and noting our concern, you know, and the statistical issue that you bring up. But I think it is kind of an area that's ripe for us to look into.
And Angela, just to piggyback on that and support you on it, I think in those conversations, we could just confront them with the data. Just be like, how in the world is this possible? Tell us what your process was to get to this. And what was the difference between the one maybe your agency sustained and the hundreds that you dismissed? What is the actual, right? What it allows us to actually ask some really important questions, perhaps just directly confronting them with that data. But again, I don't think that's something we'll be able to do like for this report.
Right.
So we'll have to be, you know, very thoughtful about that language so that we open that door in a really useful way and let our like to Member Kreiner's point, let our constituents know we're going after this. We see it and we're getting after this. That's if you ask me what my preference would be in terms of like what we're communicating there, that would be my preference. And I'll yield to Chauncey and others if they want to add to that, but I that's where I would stand on it.
I'm in agreement. I like that. I'm still processing to see if there's anything else that we could do. But I think this is a good starting point. Yeah, I think this is a good starting point. I have nothing else to add at this moment.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Smith, what did you say? What was the last point that you said, brother?
I agree with Bill.
I love it. Okay. So, board, since we agree with Soul Brother number one, Bill, where do we move from here? What is our recommendation to our staff regarding this very important item? Bill, you want to spearhead it, brother?
So I would make a motion that staff come back to us with just kind of a small draft material, like 2 paragraphs kind of thing, noting the data point and opening the door for us to ask some further questions about this data for the follow-up report. So noting that we find this to be, I mean, literally, I mean, in a methods class, this would get flagged immediately, right? Is like questionable statistics, a finding that you would need to go back and look into because it's so off, right? So we could just say, like, we find this to be a wildly disparate statistic, that it seems unreasonable to assume that of over 1,500 complaints of racism, only 3 of them are substantiated. I mean, that just requires a stretch of the imagination that we as sociologists would not be allowed to use. Like it would be laughed out of the room. And as a result of that, we're going to have to look into the methods of law enforcement agencies adjudicating these cases. And there's no way for us to understand this statistic without us looking into that in the future, and that's something we plan on doing. So perhaps, again, just to be clear, my motion would be for our DOJ, our wonderful, hardworking DOJ staffers to come up with like a paragraph or 2 that we can insert into this section that notes this, let's say, statistical data point, and how we plan on looking deeper into this data, given its oddity. That's the best I can do. I'm sorry, that wasn't the best articulation. Sorry, Chair Kreiner. I did my best. Looking for a second.
You did a great job, my friend. You did a great job.
Before we, sorry, Pastor Craig,
yeah,
before we go to just a motion, I want to make sure that we don't, that the subcommittee understands we don't need a motion for adding language of the type that we're talking about. So we don't have to be as formal as what you're referring to. We certainly, not trying to dissuade the subcommittee if they think a motion is necessary or appropriate, but it is, we are, studiously taking notes about the board's, the subcommittee's suggested language, identifying that this issue is of concern to the subcommittee, that this particular report and this concerning piece of data should be further explored. And we have a section in the report and in the draft. If you look to the final page of the civilian complaint draft, there's a section 4 for vision for future reports. And so what we could do is we can insert this language, kind of consolidate, synthesize the discussion that the subcommittee's been having, and put that portion of what's being discussed in that section. One caveat is that because this is the final meeting of this particular subcommittee, this language can be inserted in the draft that the full board will be looking at in October. But we won't have an opportunity for this subcommittee to meet, just the subcommittee to talk about this. But I want to give out everybody here in the subcommittee assurances that we are going to be as thoroughly as possible capturing the discussion that the subcommittee is having right now with regards to this important issue.
That's awesome, Alex. Thank you so much. And I'll just say to Garrett and Rebecca, I'll help. So I don't like, get work dumped on you constantly with this. I'm happy to help. So if you want some help with that, let me know between now and the next meeting. Just hit me offline, and I'll help you with whatever you want. Happy to do it.
Thank you, board member. Well, I do need help with the sermon for Sunday. If you can help me with that one, man, that'd be terrific. Got a speech on Friday and a sermon Sunday, so I'm gonna trust you, man.
Bro, I'm late on 2 writing deadlines right now, so I'm right there with you, man. I'm right there with you.
Yeah. Okay, we thank you so much. Ms. Angela, you have been waiting. Real quick, board member Bill, is there anything else, or was that okay? Wonderful. Board member Angela, you've been waiting so patiently, and your backdrop looks absolutely gorgeous behind you. So we're going to pull you on so you can have full screen. Go for it, sister.
Okay, thank you. I just had a couple of there's some more specific points going back to the recommendations. This is about the recommendations on the COAs. And one is really a technical recommendation. The first proposed one is that COA should incorporate the elimination of racial and identity profiling as part of efforts to increase public safety. And there I would just suggest that we say they should explicitly incorporate it and use a term like that, given that I think we do make, and explain, make a strong case for, the issue of racial identity profiling, that type of profiling is unlawful. COAs are addressing unlawful practices. So that is and always should be a goal of them already. But I do think that noting this and making sure that they're explicitly incorporating that will be very helpful, especially for those that aren't really thinking in that direction. The second point I wanted just to raise is going back to Andrea's point about measuring effectiveness and best practices, and let's see, about that, there was a discussion, it's not a one size fits all, Martha, you were talking about, but there, maybe in the recommendation that's dealing with that you had brought up, that they should be looking at their data for their particular agency to help them figure out effectiveness, but that I don't know if we're already building this in, but that we are recommending that they go back and look at what we have provided as best practices to be able to incorporate those as much as really is applicable to like their style or their type of COA that they're dealing with. So that is another recommendation on that one. And then my last question for Martha and Rebecca on the recommendation that we're making that there should be unfettered access for all the data. And I'm assuming we're talking about, not just the data that's being reported to DOJ, but the data and documents underlying the RIPA data that an agency may have with respect to its officers and personnel. Does that apply? And we may get questions about this at the board meetings, so something for us to think about. Does that apply to all the models of COA, or is there going to be some models of COAs where they don't typically have confidential information? I don't know the answer to that. And it's just something that I just thought about as something, you may already know the answer to that, if there should be any kind of limiting principle there, or just kind of be prepared for us to discuss it as a board when we bring up these recommendations. And then lastly, on the vision for our report in the complaint section, in addition to what we're talking about right now about the accountability for the civilian complaints, we do talk a lot about, because you may have an increase or decrease in complaints, it's hard to interpret that, because it could be that they have more open complaint procedures and that's why they're getting more complaints, or it could be a positive or negative reason why you have an increase in complaints or a decrease in complaints. And so, we don't really have a solution to that. So one possibility for the vision for our next report is maybe pick, one or two agencies where we're seeing some changes and seeing if they're, we can explore with them, or have there been changes in policies that, may explain those changes, or, what might be the explanations for that, so that we are able to show that we can, use this type of information to then maybe develop some best practices. So that's just one thought on that section. And that is all I have.
Thank you, board member. Is there any response from our staff? Or is it duly noted?
Duly noted.
Wonderful. Board members, do we have any other comments?
Yes, I have a comment.
Yes, sir.
So first, I'd like to reiterate that both the accountability and civilian complaints drafts are great, as mentioned earlier. One thing that comes to mind for me now that we're here today is the topic we talked about at our last full board meeting, and to a significant degree, and that was the theme for the report. Originally, it was just community safety or public safety broadly, and then after robust discussion and feedback, we resolved that we would also try to integrate the attacks on immigrant communities within that and try to find some form of using that as a through line throughout the forthcoming report. So obviously here we're looking specifically at the subsections on accountability and complaints and et cetera. But I'm wondering, because I don't have a copy of the other pieces of the report, but I'm wondering what DOJ is thinking in terms of integrating that into the overall theme, given the issue, the significance in terms of public importance. Obviously, when it comes to the data piece, right, the data that we're looking at is from a different time period, so that, you know, wouldn't reflect the current situation. But I would appreciate it if as much as possible, we could try to make sure that that core theme is integrated as much as possible and in a reasonable way. So I'll pause there and see if there's any feedback, other ideas.
Thank you so much, Board Member Smith. That was incredible. Is there any response from our staff?
DJ Kreiner, can I jump in on that?
Absolutely, Board Member Guerrero. Please do.
Okay, great. Well, one is just to remind everybody that DOJ has scheduled a special RIPA board meeting for October that's just going to focus on the issue of immigration and immigrants being subject to racial profiling by federal agents. And so that'll be an important place to have a discussion. With regard to this report, and I was not available for the conversation that you had, which I understand was a very robust one, and I appreciate the board having it. I don't know that it would make sense to have like immigration as a through line, given the expansive scope of everything that we're looking at. But what might make sense is perhaps in the introduction to just recognize the times we're living in and the relevance of this data and the laws that we have in place in California. I think, you know, if we get a decision, which we should any day now, on racial profiling from the U.S. Supreme Court in California by federal agents, you know, we could acknowledge that decision, and hopefully it will be a good one. And just maybe like not spend a lot of space in the report, but maybe a page worth that just reminds the public that, you know, the California laws govern California agencies and federal laws govern federal agencies, and there is no law on racial profiling at the federal level. But all law enforcement agents are subject to protection under the U.S. Constitution's Fourth Amendment, right? And just remind everyone that that's sort of a foundational protection and I think we really just have to see what the Supreme Court says, because if they issue a good decision, then we just lean into that, and that becomes the answer to the profiling question. And then pick up maybe a few more things just for context and a reminder of what California is doing to, you know, to mitigate the harm against immigrant communities. So those are just some thoughts. I guess I would not want to narrow a report that is about a lot of different communities down to immigrants, because that's the one factor we don't actually track, and but acknowledge it in the context and the landscape, and perhaps even pick up for, you know, some content from the special meeting that we're going to have. That would be one way to do it, just to not, you know, I mean, we have jurisdiction over certain thing. We should definitely relate that to the broader community and elevate these very important questions about what the feds can and cannot do. And we won't be able to answer that question except to say, you know, what the situation is. But there are upcoming opportunities that we could use, and the most flexible way for us to address this, I think, is in the introduction, kind of a landscape setting way that could also incorporate the discussion we're going to have at our full RIPA board meeting in October.
Thank you so much. Board Member Smith, is that satisfying your concern, sir?
I think it's a good start, but it's inconsistent with where we landed in the last full board meeting. In the full board meeting, we talked about addressing this issue in a more robust way as opposed to just the introduction. So I do think that is something for us to think about a little bit more. And Andrea, when we were talking about it in the full board meeting, we understood the difference between, federal authority and state and local. But what we're seeing a lot of these local jurisdictions, as you know, is what appears to be collaboration between local law enforcement agencies and federal immigration enforcement, and some of the ripple effects are very damaging.
Yeah, and if I could just jump in on that, that's going to be the topic of the October meeting. And so we'll get into that. I think there's a real need for clarity around what we in the community can and should expect of local and state law enforcement if they are called by the federal agencies, or if they are called by community members, which they have been called by community members as well. Like there's a role, for them to play. Like if they are there, and we're starting to see jurisdictions pick this up, but across the state, I mean, California has like duty to intervene statutes and duty to record and duty to report. And while those are focused on local and state law enforcement officers, I think the intention and the ethical intention is for officers to do one of those or all of those things, intervening being the most challenging of those things, right? So I think there's like an opportunity to have this discussion at the October meeting, and we're going to bring in a lot of expertise and information about this to help the public understand what's going on. Remind the public that SB 54 prohibits collaboration, and when it happens, that the Attorney General, can and should take action, and that the Attorney General will speak to that at the October meeting, right? But collaboration is distinct from call for service or call for mutual aid, and we, as a community, need to make clear what the expectations are, given the laws that we do have on the books that have to do with how officers respond and what the intent of those are, state and local officers.
Board Member Smith, would you like to have anything else said? I'll jump over to Board Member Bill.
So feel free to pass the bill.
Okay. Bill?
Thanks, Shaw. I've been talking a lot, so I don't want to step in too much here. I guess I just want to, back up Chauncey a little bit. And I understand what Andrea is saying as well. I think there are two really good points being made. I share Chauncey's concerns only because, and I'm the one that frankly brought this up, I think, in the board meeting, so I should speak to it. I just think it's really, really important for us to make clear that we are abundantly aware of the contexts of, kind of releasing this. And to me, those contexts are quite severe. So I don't think these as simple as like, well, we just do state and they do, no, these things are very, very much impacting one another. And I think we're silly to assume that our work continues to be meaningful if the federal government continues down this road. Because if we're going to be honest, This is complete lawlessness in American cities at this point in terms of law enforcement. You have unidentifiable agencies literally kidnapping people off the street on a daily basis. And we have no way of knowing what of those individuals are local law enforcement, what of those individuals are federal, and which agencies, and are they even agents? We don't know. We literally know nothing.
Yeah, we don't know nothing because, so just by way of background,
Well,
my bread and butter, what I do every day is go after DHS agents, like for the last 20 years, right? This is my area of expertise, and so I know a lot about the intersection of state and federal law, right? And so this is a real opportunity, as the board pointed out, this is like an opportunity for the RIPA board to say something. I think they should absolutely say something, and that I think is best placed, not buried in a section, but in the introduction to set the landscape. We see this, we understand this is going on. It's also an opportunity to clarify with the public where the gaps are in federal law, because quite frankly, you know, those of us who do this work, largely in the border region, we've been screaming about this stuff for years. And so this is not new stuff. It's just the bordification of California, right? That's what's happening right now. And so I think it's an opportunity for us to level set with everyone that, you know, the Fourth Amendment should be, you know, our North Star, and we should, and hopefully the Supreme Court will say, we'll use it in the right way. And if they don't, I think we'll have to address that, because if the Supreme Court, you know, cuts down, erodes the Fourth Amendment, then I think that has implications for California, right? So there are things that we can say, but what I don't want us to say is like grandstanding sort of things, because there are very specific things that we can say about what the community should expect from state law enforcement in dealing with federal agencies. And that'll be the subject of the October meeting. And I think we can take from that and put that into the report in some very like concrete ways, so that everybody knows, you know, just some, and I'm saying basic because I don't think anyone else knows this except for us in the border region, like what the federal rules are around search and seizure in California, and they're heinous laws, and I mean we can call them out like this, so people don't, like, people right now are not connecting like, oh, can they do this in Los Angeles? They sure as hell can right now under the Congress-made law that is on the books, right? So the courts can only interpret the law, right? And if the law is bad, then we're going to get bad interpretations, right? And right now in California, we have law that is good, RIPA. At the federal level, we have no equivalent. We have the opposite. We have law that is very bad, one particularly evil statute where everything that they are doing, they're relying on, right? So I think, you know, we need to help people understand that while we have expectations here in the state of California about how law enforcement should act to protect the public, we should also make clear that our ultimate salvation comes in taking out this this particular law, right? Because our reality does not change. I like it, and I'll just say this and then I'll be quiet. But it's 8 U.S.C. 1357, in case anyone's listening and wants to write that down. That's where all of it is, all the bad stuff. One statute passed during the McCarthy era, long time ago, right? And I liken that statute, which gives DHS extraordinary powers to, you know, the Ring of Sauron from Lord of the Rings. Like, it's one ring to find them, one ring to bind them, one ring to rule them all. That is how powerful that law is. We should have thrown that power into the fire. We should have marched to Mount Doom long ago and thrown it into the fire, but we have not done that. Successive administrations have put the ring on and admired how it looked on them. Ultimately, we all need to be Frodo, and we need to march up Mount Doom and throw that ring in the fire. So I just want to be real with people. Like, there is no true sanctuary in California. There's nothing ultimately that we can do except control our own people, our own officers, create expectations for them. Like, we just had a CVP shooting down here I mean, there's actually been 4 or 5 in the last 2 weeks, and it's the San Diego police that are investigating. That's what should happen. Like, local law enforcement should be investigating aggressions against our Californians, right? That's what should be happening. And that's the kind of level setting that I think we need to do in the meeting that we're going to have and in the report, so that people know where to point their energy and ire.
Well, thank you, board members. Does anyone else have a retort or comment that they would like to make?
I'll just say thanks for sharing about, all your expertise, Andrea. We greatly appreciate that. And I think this is just a super important issue that we need to make sure that the board is, addressing, meeting the moment, right? As Bill mentioned, this is not just an everyday issue. This is like super duper unique in terms of the scale and long-term devastation. And it's impacted a lot of us as human beings, as Californians, as board members in a wide variety of ways. So as we spoke about this, a couple months ago, whatever we do, whether it's a page, 2 pages, whether it's weaved throughout the report, just to make sure that it's meaningful and responsive to the moment. That's the thing that's most important to me. So I appreciate everyone's thoughts and considerations, and look forward to the next meeting where we focus on this and any next steps.
Board Member Smith, we honor you, man, for your passion, for your insight. We really do, bro. Don't ever want no one to think that they're overlooked, overheard, but we definitely see you and we appreciate you, man, and your passion. Thank you, brother. Thank you so much, Board Member Guerrero as well. And Bill, you already know, I appreciate you, bro. Board Member Angela, thank you for your input as well. We definitely want to make sure that we've heard everyone from our board. We're at a point where we're asking for any proposed edits or additions and recommendations, but it kind of seems like we've done that already. But if there are, we want to make sure we check that box for sure. But are there any extra additions or recommendations that needs to be made, or any disagreements to the recommendations that have been made that needs to be addressed? If not, I kind of think we've kind of talked a little bit about it, but if not, I want to make sure that we honor that before we move forward. Okay, so we'll move forward to our last item for discussion, which is in the 2026 report, is the vision and future report section. Do any of our board members have any topics or suggestions that needs to be included in that vision for future report section for the accountability or civilian complaint draft? If so, we want to bring it up right now so it can be included in our report. It could be anything from a continuing analysis of SB2 data or anything of that nature. Is there any topics or suggestions that needs to be included in the visions for future report? Yes, sir. Board Member Smith.
Yes, I think I heard you correctly, but just to make sure, you said as we're given an indication on what's to come down the pipeline in the future, potentially, is that what you're looking for?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, there's 2 things. Well, one we already talked about.
Right.
Or we talked about both, I guess, to some degree. But the first was earlier when we were talking about the low frequency of sustained complaints, like 0.19, right? We'll make some form of a statement in regards to it this year, and then provide an indication about the future of trying to look into it in a more in-depth way would be helpful. And then also this immigration enforcement issue, I don't think is likely to go away immediately. But potentially that's something that we can continue to address in the future too. Particularly because this year's report, there's a gap in terms of the frequency of the data, right? So at some point in time, we will have data covering this year. I don't know if it will be next year or the subsequent, but it would be good to provide an indicator that this isn't something that is just like a, one-time thing. And we plan to pick it up in the future and continue to stay on it.
Yeah, I think if I can jump in. Is that okay, DJ Kreiner? Okay, I think you're on mute.
Please, I'm sorry. Please jump on that.
Yeah, so because this is the complaint and accountability section, one thing to consider is how to capture complaints about federal agents that and I don't know if we don't capture that in the RIPA data. I don't know if there are fields that DOJ separately captures about who the aggressor is in the complaints. I mean, I guess these are not complaints about law enforcement, the agency. These would be external complaints, the same as a member of the public, an aggressor. But that is like one of the roles that state and local law enforcement can play, is to report so in our data, in the RIPA data, the only thing that we have related to DHS is if there's a pass off, which isn't the same thing, right? So I think it's worth just thinking about how law enforcement, maybe it becomes a recommendation, how local and state law enforcement are recording complaints, and it's not in our regulations right now, but complaints about other agencies, and maybe there's room for a regulatory change to capture that. But that that means that people are filing complaints, and people need to be willing to do that. And I know a lot of people are not willing to do that, but where they are willing to do that, that becomes a helpful data point. It also becomes the basis for, it's a call for service. It's the basis for an incident report, which quite frankly, for those of us who litigate, is the way we find out who's at the scene, what officers are involved, what was going on, because we can't get that out of the federal government, right? So there is a role for the recording with body cams, the reporting of incident reports, and in certain instances, the intervention, and definitely the investigation, right? And so just something for us to maybe noodle on, and maybe this is a next year thing. I don't know how much we can move now, since given where we are in the year, but just something for us to noodle on, because there are a fair number of people who are now making complaints to local and state law enforcement agencies about federal agencies.
I'll be super quick. I honestly just am going to second Andrea's suggestion. I was actually going to ask it as a question, but she articulated it much better. My question was just going to be, is there a way for us to start, recording what are Californians' experiences with these federal agencies? And I think we can be creative about how we pull that data. And I think Andrea just came up with some really good examples of what we could do. And I think Chauncey threw something in the chat as well. So I think there are some really good ways we could start to get at that, but maybe we can continue to be creative and think about how we can collect that data or work with others who are collecting that data. I would be really surprised if we don't have either through some of our universities or through some of our community organizations, or both, people already collecting some of this data with Californians around the state. So maybe we can all do a little bit of work to dig for some of that stuff. But I was just going to ask the question more broadly than Andrea just got at. So I'll summarize my comment by saying I completely back what she just suggested, and think we should be creative in how we pull together that kind of data, and that we could give voice to some of that stuff.
Awesome. And yes, Bill, I do agree, and I do see what Board Member Smith did place inside of our comment box for our staff to kind of look over. That's perfect. Is there anything else that needs to be added or would like to be added? And staff, do you see what Board Member Smith has put in the comment box? I know you are jotting notes as well, but does our staff see what our board member put in there, just to make sure that he is heard?
Yes, thank you to the subcommittee. Thank you to board members for your thoughts about this. As I understand it, one of the things that we're talking about is in the vision for future reports that we have a discussion, not just about the prior discussion that we had talked about with regards to the concerning level of sustained complaints in the SB2 data, but also that there is a discussion, a vision for future reports about how best to analyze or assess complaints about state and local agencies in interaction with federal immigration efforts. And I just echo, I know that some of the board members had also referenced the fact that, yeah, we will have data from this year available for next year's report. We don't have data from the data is always 1 year looking backwards. So we won't have any complaints data for 2025 until next year's report. So that that would be the time that potentially the subcommittee could also analyze the complaints that are coming in. But with regards to this report, that a portion of the vision for future reports section also discussed this issue about how the subcommittee and the board generally best address complaints about federal immigration enforcement.
That would be
Hey,
great,
Bryson.
and perhaps, perhaps for the language around future report could be broad enough, because I know because of the timeline, we basically have to say it now. That language could be broad enough to capture the impact of court decisions on and federal policies on racial profiling. Something big enough that, like, so for example, if the U.S. Supreme Court comes down with a decision, it could happen anytime from now till December, that we will want to dig in on that one way or the other. Whether it's good or bad, it's going to affect us here in California, and I think we'll want to understand the impact of that, not to mention if there's any Congress-made law that would impact or affect us. We can imagine a variety of things that might happen. So we won't know them in time to finish off this report. And so just broad enough language that is grounded enough in, like, how those things will impact our mandate, racial profiling, and Californians at large.
Thank you, Board Member Burrow. Appreciate it. And thank you, Brother Simpson, for your response and for your ear. We really appreciate it, man. Are there any other items that we would like to discuss regarding this 26th report before we move forward from any of our board members? As I'm hearing that, we can move forward to our public comment. If all our board members are in agreement, we definitely want to hear from our public. So at this time, here's what we're going to do. We're going to invite all of those who are a part of our public that would like to provide comments regarding the accountability and complaint section of this report. We're going to ask if you would raise your hand. And then if I miss you, it's not a problem with you maybe just saying something so that I can hear it. If our board members, if I miss someone, by way of me not seeing their hand raised, if you could just let me know, that way we do things decently and in order, we do things in proper protocol so everyone is addressed. At the same time, those who are speaking, someone else is not speaking over him, that would be great. And once I call you and once you are asked to speak, if you would kindly unmute yourself and then let us know the area that you're coming from. If you are representing an organization, we want to know that as well. If you would like to, no pressure. You're not made to, but it would be nice just for our permanent records for us to notate who you are, who you're speaking on behalf of, then by all means, give your comment. We're going to go in sections. So we're going to start in Northern California, then we'll move to Central California, and then Southern California, and then we'll circle back just to make sure we cover everyone. But at this time, I'm going to ask if there are any members of our public from Northern California that would like to speak. If so, would you raise your hand? And if I cannot see you, by all means, you're more than welcome to unmute yourself and address so that I could address you formally and you could speak. Anyone from our community from Northern California that would like to speak. I don't see any hands raised and I don't hear anyone. I will move forward. Are there any comments from Central California? I don't see any hands. I don't see any comments. And I don't hear anyone. I'll move to Southern California. Are there any comments from Southern California? I do not see any hands. I don't see any comments. And I definitely do not hear anyone. Have I overlooked anyone? Are there any other public comments that would like to be made? Board members, I don't see anyone. I don't hear anyone. Have I overlooked anyone, board? Well, I want to thank all those from our public. I thank you for joining us. I thank you for being with us today. And again, if there are any comments that you would like to make, I'm going to give one final opportunity just to make sure I don't overlook anyone. Anyone from our public? Wonderful. I think I see a comment. Hold on 1 second. Again, I don't see any hands raised. To our staff and to our board, I don't see any hands raised, and I don't hear anyone. At this time, I will close our public comment period, and we'll move forward to our next steps. Before we conclude today's meeting, I would like to ask DOJ if there are any questions regarding next steps that needs to be made. Staff, are there any questions regarding the board's direction?
Thank you, Pastor Kreiner. We have been
Absolutely.
chatting off. We've been chatting offline to make sure that there are no questions that we have. Really just want to thank all of the subcommittee members for all of the enthusiastic consideration of the draft and providing such great feedback. We will take all of these comments and make sure that we synthesize these in the appropriate sections that we talked about, and also address any of the edits that all of the board members have given. So I really do appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely, my friend. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to our staff for the time that they put in. And also thank you to our public for the time, consideration of coming on and listening to us, and to our board. We thank you so much for the time you've taken out of your schedule to be here with us. And in order for us to conclude, we want to do things the right way, right? We want to follow Robert's Rules of Order. So I'm going to ask if there is a motion to adjourn today's meeting.
I will move to adjourn the meeting today, or today's meeting.
Is there a second on the floor?
I'll second.
Thank you so much. It has been moved and properly second that our meeting today will be adjourned at 2:27 officially. We're going to ask, and we're going to thank each of you for joining us today. And this will conclude our meeting for today. Thank you all. You have an amazing, amazing day.